The world is complex, the Bible is complex. Human existence is a tangled ball of experience, perception, and understanding. Ravel is a puzzling word, denoting both a tangling and untangling. This podcast attempts to hold honest conversations in good faith. Some ideas expressed in this podcast will be challenging. Others will be obvious. When a PhD in biblical interpretation and a habitually podcasting man-child discuss matters of society, scripture, and scandal, you get Ravel.
Hey everybody, you are listening to Ravel, and it's me, your best buddy Basil, and with me, as always, we have the renewed, the reborn, the New Year's baby, Dr. Christopher Ryan Gates. How's it going, buddy?
Oh boy, it's going good. It's going really good.
It's the new year, and
is.
it's a new tiny little baby, and we all have high hopes for this new year. We are recording this on literal January 1st, 2022.
Yeah, cutting it a little closer than we generally prefer, but you know, it was a busy couple of weeks, I think, for the both of us.
I was off traversing the multiverse for my Christmas holiday. And,
Yes.
The time between Christmas and New Year's is sort of a time warp that nothing productive gets done anyways between the 25th and the 31st.
It seems that way.
Yeah, so we've made it out of the black hole that is the last week of 2021, and we're starting fresh, well, I'm starting healthy. You don't sound very healthy, Chris.
Yeah, I picked up a little something, some kind of I don't know, cold, flu, I don't know.
Could
COVID,
be anything.
Who knows what I
It
got?
could be
yeah.
anything these days.
Trying to stay away from folks and all of that sort of stuff. But it's difficult because you just love people and you have things to do. But nonetheless, everybody down here around where I'm at everybody's come down with it somehow or another. I was kind of on the tail end of it, so I'm not really too worried about anybody else at this point because they've all had it. But yeah, it's been lasting about a week for everybody, so I'm kind of hoping that it clears up here in the next couple days. But anyhow, I'm happy to be
Rain
here.
or shine, sniffles or no sniffles, Dr. Christopher Ryan Gates is here to bring us the good word.
Reporting for duty.
Yeah. Any other updates before we kind of talk about what we're doing here?
No.
Baby's good. Baby's growing.
Yeah, baby's
Okay.
good. We just got our last final ultrasound. Got some pictures of his little face in there. And they said actually they might have moved the due date up just a little couple weeks. So we're not really sure when the baby's going to come, but sometime in the middle to early March. So just a couple months.
Oh, that's sooner than I thought.
Yeah, and then let the listeners in on something which you know about already, but I have started working at a church. I'm pastoring there, and that's been going on for the last couple of weeks, keeping it a little bit under wraps just for right now. Not a full disclosure, but I have been doing that. So
Soft
in addition-
disclosure, as we say in the
Soft.
biz.
Yeah, until we kind of get things ironed out and where we'd like them to be. We're just kind of keeping it low key right now before we throw out any big, locally here, invitations to folks who want to come visit and that sort of thing, and start posting and doing all the stuff that goes along with it. But that's new for us this year. New baby, new church. I got a Peloton for my wife and I
Whoa.
for Christmas, so we'll be riding our way. I like to run, as I've mentioned on the show before, but with the baby coming, you just never know if you're going to be able to have the opportunity to go out and run for an hour.
Yeah.
So this way we can just work out right in the house with the baby sitting there right next to us, hopefully. So that...
Things are looking up. Things are looking up for you, Chris.
It's going to be a crazy 2022. Don't really have any resolutions because I don't do that. But how about you? You looking forward to anything this year?
Nope. Just surviving. I'm working on a new magnetic propulsion device that hopefully, I can get the flying saucer running here. I'm thinking probably by March. Not a coincidence, I think, that your child and my garage-built UFO will both be up and running probably around the same time.
Wow. Well, if you need any infant,
test pilots,
yeah.
I'll make sure to put a car seat in it for you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think we should get into it here. Today it is, we have no guests, it's just you and I. It's kind of fun. This is kind of nice. We had a couple of requests that, throughout so far, everybody has been very supportive, enjoying the show very much. We did have a couple of requests that, we don't need to rely so much on having guests on the show. And yes, of course, we agree. So we're going to start out 2022 with a good old-fashioned Bible study, or a teaching at least.
Yeah, well, whatever. I don't know that there's much of a difference, really, but I thought, it is it's hard scheduling sometimes, even just with the two of us, and then getting a third person in here. But also, as you were saying, when you have, two such great personalities and wonderful people, what do you even need?
Right?
Who don't need to overdo it,
Who needs guests to spice it up? We can carry this all on our own, Chris. Well, we'll at least learn that as we go here. So, it's funny because the first non-launch of Ravel, for those who may be just tuning in and haven't heard the history, we first started this show back in 2018. We had actually done, six or eight episodes that you and I had just gotten together and done, the two of us, and, explored the Bible and other things. And those episodes are gone forever. But the original idea of the show was a little bit more, focused on just the two of us working through things. And I am happy and exuberant at all of the guests who we've had on, and will continue to bring on the show. But this is fun. It feels like a little bit more like what we had originally planned for the show.
Yeah. Well, and as we talked about after the relaunch here too, it was, the world has changed, and just it feels like a totally different place in the last couple of years. So, it has been really fun dialoguing with other people, and giving us a chance to kind of find our footing and all of that. But yes, as you had mentioned, we have had some people who, we're like, we need some Bible study in there. And we do want to, that's always been part of the plan, to mix that in. We've already had a few episodes where we've just looked at a couple different passages. And I just thought, since we didn't really have anything, after the Death of God series, and kind of wrapped that up, and finished out with the Christmas extravaganza there at the end, which was so much fun, by the way. I hope everybody really enjoyed that. But,
if you haven't checked it out, you should. Blast. It won't quite have the same Christmassy feel if you're not listening to it on Christmas, but perhaps you want to teleport yourself back to a more magical time around Christmas. Go listen to that episode. You're going to love it.
Yeah, it was super fun. But now coming into the new year, we have a couple ideas on the back shelf, but we thought we should just, do a little bit of Bible study. And it was really convenient because as I went to this church where it's kind of strange how they choose pastors sometimes. They'll receive a bunch of resumes and look over them and invite people in for interviews, and then they put you in front of the church and ask you to preach a sermon. So that was the course of events for me, and I came in and I preached a sermon there. And then, as it stands now, it went well, and I am the new pastor. They liked it, but I really, really love the passage that I taught there. I thought it was a great timely message for that church, and then I thought it might be also a great timely message for our listeners. So I thought it would be really fun to go over it, and it's something of can be controversial, I suppose, in some circles. Yeah. It is the the story in the Gospel of John of Jesus turning water into wine. So I don't know, how do you in your, I'm pretty sure that I know how charismatics generally have understood the topic of alcohol, but generally kind of abstaining almost entirely. Are they not, in the charismatic circles that you come from?
I would say that is definitely not abnormal. My experience has always sort of been, or at least the teachings in the Christian circles, is most of the time abstaining, but if you do have a celebratory wine or something at a dinner, it's just not getting totally sloshed. Jesus doesn't want you to get totally sloshed, is the general. I don't know if that's a biblical term. I think that's from one of the earlier translations. Sloshed. Other translations use words like schmammered, the ancient Greek, I believe.
Yeah.
Sauced is sort of the more contemporary translation, but it just depends. But you get the point.
Yeah. Well, coming up Baptist, generally the Baptists, kind of funny because they all kind of privately drink. Not all of them. Mm-hmm. There are many people who keep it, they believe that the Bible teaches that no Christian should ever drink. It's very interesting to have the conversation with folks about it. But, in most Baptist churches, most people, you have to sign, some, if you're going to work there, that you won't drink. If you're going to Baptist colleges and things, you have to say that you won't or whatever. And it becomes this kind of, it's a very contentious sort of topic that is kind of, before we even get into the text, I just thought might be fun to just kind of discuss for a minute, because I think about it a lot. And I don't have any, particular issues myself with it. I never have. I never thought that the Bible has really, forbade it across the board. And I don't think that it does still. You'd be hard-pressed to find a place where the Bible strictly prohibits any believer from having a drink ever. It certainly prohibits drunkenness. But it's one of those things where, in moderation, it's just like everything else. It's just a very funny issue that people would choose to be so staunch on when there are so many other issues, food and finances and
shrimp,
well,
ham,
sure, those
cheese on hamburgers.
Yeah, but it's
just to name some obscure, deep Old Testament abominations, if anybody's interested.
Yeah, in Israel, when you go, you can't get a cheeseburger anywhere.
Can't have cheeseburgers. It's not a thing, man. It's an abomination.
Yes.
And it's kind of funny because I don't know. I've never been in a Christian community that outright, abstains altogether, and yet very extremely, literally maybe never, actually, now that I'm trying to think of a case, will they, the members of this community, whichever one it may be, drink around one another.
Yeah.
Even if there's like a church dinner, or even if you're going just out to dinner with church members or something, nobody's having a casual drink with dinner or something, and yet everybody sort of would agree that it's totally fine to have a drink at dinner, it's all good, and yet people don't really choose to walk that line when they are in the presence of one another, it seems.
Yeah.
They save that for their non-churchy dinner dates.
Yeah, well, and this is actually one of the issues. It's kind of funny about the thing, because people always will, they want to err on this side of safety, where they basically will say you just shouldn't drink it all because it could lead to all of these different things. And I just think that's a funny thing to apply to a particular issue that you don't apply to anything else. Greed, for example, you could become obsessed with money. I know people, their entire lives are driven by the pursuit of wealth and all of these different things. It's a very real thing that can happen to anybody. And it's like, we don't tell people you shouldn't have a job and try to earn money and have a savings account because, well, you could become obsessed with your money, so it's a strange.
We don't tell people to not make good financial decisions because it may, increase their wealth and inspire greed.
Right. You teach people to use discretion and to keep their priorities straight and to know, this is, my heart is in the right place here, and I can participate in whatever area it is, in a particular degree of moderation. But as you were talking about when people make the decisions, one of the things I always heard was, like you shouldn't go out and drink because you never know. There might be a person there who's, a recovering alcoholic, and they'll see you having a drink and then they'll fall back into their alcoholism or something. Somebody's probably heard that all the time. It's very funny because I know many people, not many, but at least a few, 5 people who have been alcoholics in the past.
Yeah, people in recovery, things like that.
And I know some still struggling with it, but most of them, as I talk to them about it, they realize, like, as they're recovering, this is going to be an issue for me for the rest of my life. Like, they don't assume they're going to go out somewhere and not be around someone who's having a drink. They don't assume I'm going to go to Chili's and not see anybody having a drink, or out wherever to a game or whatever. And the idea that it's like you're, going to lead somebody to fall back into that it's very strange. There could be an instance in which it could, but when Paul's talking about casting stumbling blocks in this particular issue, I think the stumbling block that gets cast more often is actually with a believer drinking in front of another believer who thinks that it's wrong. And then there's this kind of judgment cast on these people, and they start looking at them kind of funny, or, like looking down their noses at them, or having some false sense of piousness or something, because there is this in the people that are the teetotalers. There's this kind of, sense of like they are being pharisaical almost, in a sense, by not participating in this thing, which the Bible doesn't even say that you can't participate in. And then they're thinking that sets them in this kind of higher plane of holiness at times. I'm not saying that that's the case with everybody, but I've seen it before. And when I think about causing...
It's at least sort of the stereotype that exists for some reason.
Yeah. It's just a really funny topic. I think that the Bible doesn't teach anywhere complete abstinence. It certainly teaches us to avoid drunkenness. Over and over again, it teaches us that. But it doesn't anywhere strictly prohibit that all Christians should completely abstain from alcohol. And it's just an interesting topic that usually gets kind of tied into this, and it affects people's interpretations of this story and this miracle, which we're going to get into here. But I just thought that might be an interesting point that people might be kind of curious about, because it comes up a lot as I teach in my, at the college there. It comes up in almost every single class, one way or the other. Tongues, speaking in tongues and praying in tongues, and alcohol comes up throughout the course of almost every class. It doesn't matter what the class is, but somehow or another, one of those two things comes up, and they'll ask me, what do you think about praying in tongues? Or what do you think about alcohol?
That's
all
funny.
The time. So anyway, I thought that people might be interested in that topic. We can get to tongues at a different time.
Two equally scandalous topics.
For the Baptist, yes.
Yeah.
I don't teach at a Baptist college either. It's non-denominational, but it comes up all the time. They're just interesting. I think people really struggle with those. So anyhow.
It is interesting because those are contentious, like strictly with, like, the contention is caused by forces within the church. Like, that's not even an externally motivated controversy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I find it very interesting. Nobody on the outside of the church is looking in and be like, oh, what's up with the tongues and the alcohol, guys? It's like a strictly internally motivated argument. I don't know why. I don't know why I felt like I wanted to point that out, but I feel something funny stirring in my soul when I think about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is, going back many episodes ago now at this point. Man, we're just trucking along here, aren't we? Yeah, we talked about the divisions in the church, and that is one of those areas, the doctrine, where we kind of divide our denominations at, and it does. And then you start to, oh, well, those people do this and these people do that. And I remember I was at a birthday party one time for a friend of mine who was a Methodist, and his pastor was there. And this was when I was young, and he was turning 21, and it was everybody from his church, and they basically threw a keg party for this kid when he turned 21. And I just thought it was very strange. And the pastor walked up and he had a beer in his hand and was like, "Hey, I'm the pastor at the, Methodist church." And I was like,
"Whoa, cool guy alert.
The Methodists
cool pastor alert.
The Methodists are like into it here." But yeah, so the Methodists would look at,
keeping it real.
Or the Baptists look at the Methodists and say, "You guys don't even love Jesus. Look at your pastors at a keg party." And then, look down the street at the Charismatics and you guys are crazy with your tongues and all that stuff. But those two issues, I don't know. Even in, the non-denominational school I teach at, they come up all the time. So, and it's germane, the topic of alcohol to this particular study, this idea, this miracle where Jesus turns water into wine that we see in John chapter 2. So if everybody has their Bibles while you're driving in your car or doing the dishes, and you want to follow along, in John chapter 2, this very cool miracle takes place right at the beginning of Jesus' ministry in John. And we had talked a little bit about John. We probably I don't want to go too far into like all the introductory stuff with John, but his whole purpose in writing his gospel can pretty much be summed up there in at the end in chapter 20. Where he basically says, I don't have it right in front of me, but where he says, I've written these things. These are written that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. So at the end of his gospel, he kind of tells you what the purpose of the whole thing was. And his gospel, some people may know, is kind of divided into these two major sections where it's the book of signs at the beginning in chapters kind of halfway through chapter 1 and then through chapter 12. Some people divide it a little bit differently, but right there, the first half, the book of signs, and you have those 7 miracles of Jesus that are in there. And then the latter half there, 13 to 20, you have the book of exaltation, and that's going to kind of move through some of the implications of those signs. But the signs, the miracles, are given to demonstrate to people who Jesus is. And that is the purpose of, these miracles that Jesus is performing, and it is the purpose of him turning water into wine. So,
what's weird? I don't know if I ever had heard that before. The separation of the book of John into the book of signs. What was the second one?
Exaltation. There's different names.
I don't think I'd ever heard of that before.
Yeah. It is.
What is is this just an academic thing, or is there like some sort of canonical thing to this?
Well, yeah.
Is there a rich church history of this? Distinction?
I don't know where the distinction first came, and it's not to say either that they're two separate documents. That's not the claim at all. It is one cohesive book, but there is this shift that takes place where there's kind of in the front half a demonstration of the power of Jesus on earth, and then kind of the second half is the implication of those sorts of things. So it's just kind of the structure.
I must have missed that day in my New Testament class.
Yeah, it's pretty standard. It's a pretty standard idea, I think. I've heard it several times from several different folks, but it's every gospel is going to have a particular outline, and they're all very well. A lot of people kind of assume and think a lot of times that the Gospels are just kind of a hodgepodge of, here's these things that Jesus did. But each one of them is very well thought out. They're very well constructed. They're very intentional in the way that they're communicating and telling the stories, and they all do it a little bit differently. But this is the structure that most scholars, I guess, have recognized that John uses. I'm sure that there are some others out there, but this is the one that I've always, it's just been the easiest for me to retain. I mean, it's like 2 parts. I mean, you have the prologue too, that's in, verses 1 to 18 in chapter 1, and then The book of signs starts right after that, and then you have the book of exaltation, but then you also have the epilogue there at the end, which is basically all chapter 4. But I mean, it's like, or not chapter 4, chapter 21. It's 4 parts. So yeah, it's just easy to remember. I've just always remembered it. But
yeah. No, that's great. I'm learning new things here on the show too. Free podcast.
Free. So the first of these miracles, after that epilogue there in chapter 1, and then after just a brief story about, calling some disciples, we have this very first story that happens in John chapter 2. And in John chapter 2, verse 1, it says, "On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, 'They have no more wine.'" So probably just kind of stop there and kind of give a little bit of the background, a little bit of the context. There are some people who will make something of the fact that, John says that this took place on the third day, and they will talk about kind of the significance of the third day, and if there is anything, of any significance that's actually transpiring there, or that should be kind of recognized. People have pointed out the fact that in the third day shows up a lot of times in the Old Testament. So you have like Abraham seeing the place that the Lord was going to give to him and all of his descendants in Genesis 22. And then you have God meeting his people at Sinai in Exodus 19. That happens on the third day. And you have on the third day, the Lord revives his fallen people in Hosea 6. And then you have on the third day, Jonah, it comes out of the belly of the fish on the third day. And then some people have even pointed to the fact that all of the plants and all of the vegetation and all of those things, the grape vines in the creation order, those things were all created on the third day. And then, of course, we all know and recognize that Jesus rose from the dead on the third day. So there might be something going on with the third day imagery there. Some people think of it as just the detail. I don't know how I feel all the time about whether or not there are superfluous details that are just added into stories and they just say it just to say it, or whether or not everything is completely and entirely intentional. But this took place on the third day. And it says that Jesus' mother has been invited to this wedding. So we don't know exactly who these people were, but friends of, somehow Jesus' family, one way or the other. And Jesus' mom has been invited. So then she's, invited Jesus, and then he's brought along his disciples, and they're all there at the wedding. So weddings, much like today in the ancient Near Eastern culture, it was, the biggest sort of event that a family would ever throw. And a lot like, it is today. I can't really think of many other bigger occasions for a family than that they would throw a wedding for, one of their children. And in those days, such was the case. And they went really big for the weddings. A lot of the weddings would last for a week at a time, where they would have, people coming and going in and out of the family home for a week, and they would be supplying food, and they would be supplying wine, and all of these different things all week long for people to come in and enjoy. And it was something of a demonstration of, the family's ability to be generous, to provide for, the people in the community, to provide for their friends, and even more than that, in the ancient Near East, whereas today it's generally the bride and her family's responsibility to take care of the wedding day, the reception and the ceremony and all of that stuff, and paying for all of that. The financial resources in the ancient Near East were put up by the groom and by the groom's family. Also, in the ancient Near East, the weddings, generally the primary focus of the wedding in the ancient Near East was the groom. Whereas today, the whole thing kind of centers around the bride, and it's, the bride's day, and it's her day, and
Oh, yeah, interesting.
that's kind of how we understand it. Back then, it was about the groom. It was about this new man who was rising up to this place where he was going to be a man, and he was going to start his own family, and he was going to be, adding on to his family's legacy, line, lineage, all of those sorts of things. And it was really, people were more concerned about this young man, the role that he was going to fill in the community, and all of those different things. As part of that, it was his responsibility to take care of the wedding and the reception and all of those different things. So it was kind of his very first act, his very first kind of demonstration of his ability to be a provider for his family, of his ability,
Really?
yes, to take care of.
That is so different than what it is today. I did not know this. This is interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, keep it going.
Yeah.
Sounds like a real blast, but it sounds like, it's funny because at least the trope nowadays is that, the guy is involved in so much as, his bride asks him which color napkins he likes better. And he says, I don't care. And then he gets in trouble, and then he picks a color of napkins. And then the bride says, no, wrong choice. We're getting the other napkins. And then, he's not really involved in it. But you're saying this was like a display he had to put on to like prove himself as a provider and member of the community.
Yeah. Basically, it was. And it goes along with the idea of, the honor and shame kind of culture that they had back in those days. And there was in a very real way, even your private affairs were kind of public. There wasn't a whole lot that was private. There was a lot that had to do with reputation. There was a lot that had to do with how people thought of you, almost like a caste system where, you're kind of put into these different categories based on kind of, your associations with other people, your performance in certain situations and those sorts of things. And you kind of earn a reputation for yourself based on the way that you perform, in your community. And one of the very first acts that a man, it essentially is the first act that a man has to perform in establishing a new home is, throwing his wedding. Now, this also is going to be contingent upon, of course, his father and his family's resources and all of those things. And his family is helping him along with this. And it's almost just as much as his dad's deal as it is his. But, his father's status is a direct reflection onto him. So they're kind of, they're one and the same in a sense. But you want to make a really good impression for everybody is the point when you're throwing these weddings. You want to make sure that like this is going to be within your means. Everybody has different means and you can only do as much as you can do. But you want to make sure that with the resources you have, you're providing a wonderful experience for the entire community, all of your friends and family and all these people to come together and enjoy this time. It's not different in that way from weddings today, too, that people, you want to be able to provide for everybody within your means, that everybody can come together and have a good time. But, the weddings they'll range in what people are able to provide for their guests.
And usually not a week long.
Usually also not a week long. But one of the things that was always, very important at these weddings was what people were going to have to drink. And your drink options were very limited in the ancient Near East. Water could be something of a scarce commodity, all its in its own, especially drinking water, depending on where you live and if you're, near any kind of spring or river or anything like that, or if you just have a well there in your community. Water could be a scarce resource, but even if it wasn't scarce, it's a party, and you don't just want to drink water at a party. You want to have some kind of party beverage, and since they didn't have sodas or any other, types of drinks like that, different kinds of juices and things like that, but wine, a little bit of alcohol, always, kind of makes the party a little bit better. It just does, depending on, what church you go to. But Wine would have been a staple at any, social gathering there in the ancient Near East. And at this party, what it tells us here is that this family who had put this wedding together, this particular groom, had all of these people there, and somehow the wine ran out. We don't know what day of the wedding this was. We don't know how long it had been going on. We don't know how many people had been there.
Poor planning on behalf of the groom. His reputation is at stake.
Exactly.
The honor of his family, his position in society. He ran out of wine. The stakes are even higher on this story than I even ever expected.
Exactly. And it may, in the long run, who knows? I mean, I don't know. People back then, they may have remembered this forever. Oh, yes.
That
Joaz, the guy who ran out of wine. Yeah, we remember you and your family. Yeah, great wedding.
And back then, stuff like that became like... Yeah.
Oh, it was like scandalous.
More than your legacy, it's like your curse.
Yeah.
That is your. Not only do you live with that reputation, but your children and your children's children, son of Joaz.
Yes, the wineless.
Son of the wineless.
Yeah. But it is true, and that was kind of at stake, and whatever, even if in time people would have forgot about it, right then and there in that moment, it would have been incredibly embarrassing. Even if just for the day, if people were going to forget about it, which I don't think they would have, but just for that day, it would have been terrible. The party would have ended. It would have been, kind of a disaster, really, in this situation. So the wine goes out. We know that Mary has been invited there because she's friends of the family. So she's looking around. She's perceiving and seeing that something has gone wrong here. And she looks and says, oh no, there's no more wine. In verse 3, it says that she looks to Jesus, and Jesus' mother said to him, they have no more wine. Then this very interesting response from Jesus in verse 4, and I always really, really love this verse. John chapter 2, verse 4, Jesus says to Mary, woman, why do you involve me? My hour has not yet come. And I'm reading from the New International Version. And the New International Version does a pretty good job of translating this particular verse. And we've talked a little bit about translation issues before, but this is a passage that I use as a case study in hermeneutics all the time when I'm talking about interpretation in translation, and particularly in different English translations, because you get a wide range of English translations in this. And people, if you have your own Bibles, you can look and see how your Bible translates it. But in the NIV, Jesus says, woman, why do you involve me? In the NLT, he says, dear woman, that's not our problem. In the ESV, Jesus said to her, woman, what does this have to do with me? In the NASB, Jesus says, woman, what does this have to do with us? In the King James, Jesus said, woman, what have I to do with you or thee? And in the Good News, it says, you must not tell me what to do. And then in the Holman, it says, what has this concern of yours to do with me, woman?
All very good questions, Jesus.
Yeah. So it's a really interesting kind of passage to look at and to kind of, see some of the nuance and kind of implication that's going on here. The reason that this is so difficult for people to translate is, one, because, well, let's just start with what it actually says in the Greek. In the Greek, and if you'll remember, we don't like to use the term literally here. We like to use woodenly. But woodenly, in the Greek, what it says is, what to me and to you, woman. Those are the Greek words. If you were just going to translate them woodenly, the Greek words are what to me and to you, woman, is what Jesus says. So what is going on here is this is a Hebrew colloquialism, and this is when you get to talking about translation issues. This is really fun because it's a Hebrew colloquialism that Jesus would have spoken in Aramaic, and then that John would have recorded in Greek, and then as we're reading it would be translated into English. So there's this long chain of kind of translation and transmission history here that you kind of have to sift through in order to figure out exactly what Jesus is saying. But it is a Hebrew idiom. It appears in the Old Testament in Hebrew some 5 times, and it's essentially it's a term of disassociation. And it would have, it would read, even in the Hebrew, what is it to me and to you? And that was a phrase that people would say in Hebrew. And essentially, it's a way of saying that you and I don't have anything in common. It's basically a way of saying, like, why are you talking to me? We don't share anything here. It's a way of kind of telling somebody, mind your own business, or we're not together in this. It's actually very interesting because in the Gospel of Mark, this is what the demons say to Jesus when Jesus shows up. Jesus shows up, really? And the demon-possessed man says to Jesus, "What to me and to you?" The same thing that Jesus just says to his mother right here. And he's basically saying, like, what are you doing here? Why are you... Leave me alone. Go away. And you can't necessarily say, you can't maybe know the full range of what this expression might mean, but we do see it in several places all throughout the Bible. Sometimes it's said, like in an instance from a demon to Jesus, and then it's like there is this kind of, you almost might sense some kind of contention or something that goes along with it, but it may also just be, a gentle way of saying we don't have anything in common here. However it gets translated, the fact of the matter is Jesus is saying to his mother here, his mother is telling him, she's, giving him a little elbow in the side, and she's saying, Jesus, they're out of wine. And Jesus is looking back at his mother and saying, essentially, all of those translations kind of get it right a little bit. I mean, I don't know that I could necessarily offer any better than any of those have. But basically what he's saying to her is, this isn't your concerns here are not the same as my concerns. Oh,
interesting. So it's not even just like a this isn't my problem thing. I mean, it's kind of like a this isn't my problem, but it's also more directed at Jesus's mother.
Yeah.
Than it is like at the situation.
Yeah. And that perhaps is, many scholars have looked at this and have suggested that this is the moment. John is going to go on and say, and we all understand this, most of us who are good, Sunday school students know that this is Jesus' first miracle. So right. This is, in many respects, the inauguration of Jesus' ministry. And no coincidence that it's taking place at a wedding where there's this new family being established. There's this new kind of era for this community being established. There's now this new kind of mode of Jesus' life that's being established. And what that means is while he has grown up his entire life and has been subject to Joseph, so long as he was alive, presumably dead at this point, and he has been subject to Mary his whole life and has been an obedient son. He's now stepping into his ministry, and he's now a man himself, and he is basically saying to his mother, you don't get to tell me what to do anymore. And that's interesting. I'm wondering, does this, I've heard it sort of pontificated or taught in the past that this was like Mary knew who Jesus was and what he was capable of, and she knew that this was the moment that he would shine and start his ministry. Do you have thoughts on that? Do you think that I can't even remember the details on why this was, I don't know, such a point to be made in the teaching I was listening to, but there was something about how like
Mary knew that he could do it, and that's why she asked him.
Well, I would say she certainly knew that he could do it. And, there's nothing to say that the way that John puts it here at the end is he says this was the first of the signs through which Jesus revealed his glory. So if you take that just at face value, it's the first of the signs that Jesus revealed his glory, then it's the first public demonstration of what he's capable of doing. Interesting thought is whether Jesus had private demonstrations of what he was able to do.
I was just thinking about that. I was thinking maybe we could do a whole episode on it, because there's some very interesting. Of course, there's the biblical, standards for what the early life of Jesus was like, what it may have included, and things like that. But then, of course, there's some extra biblical resources about, what somebody who wrote something thought that Jesus's early life might have been. I think there was some, I don't know if it was the Dead Sea Scrolls or some sort of other Gnostic writings that were found recently, but talked about like Jesus as a young boy, like, I don't know, bringing a bird back to life or something. All sorts of.
I think some of that is in the Gospel of Thomas, if I'm not mistaken.
That actually is probably exactly correct. Yeah, so that would have been in the Apocrypha.
Yeah. So yes, there's lore, about it. Of course, there's some things. I think one of them, I don't know if it was the Gospel of Thomas, but I remember hearing that it was Jesus pushed a boy off of a roof or something, or off of a cliff, and killed him, and then went down and resurrected him. And I was like, well, surely that didn't happen. That can't possibly be true.
Hey man, boys will be boys.
But yeah, we don't know, if Jesus didn't, if the Lord didn't provide for, even Mary. She's trying to make dinner one night, and we're out of flour. And, little 8-year-old Jesus doesn't say, "Are you sure? Look again." And she looks back again, and, who knows? Who knows? We can't say.
See, like a Leave It to Beaver type of storyline. Oh, Jesus. She puts her hands on her hips, and the laugh track rolls.
Yeah. I don't put a lot of stock in those ideas, but they're certainly to go back to the original question you asked about Mary, knowing, she certainly knew. I mean, she knew he was immaculately conceived. She was visited by angels. She became pregnant, knowing she had never been with a man. So clearly something very special. She's, I'm sure, realizes who he is. He's Messiah. He's the one who's come to deliver his people, and probably knows, yes, at this point, he has miracle working power, and would seem that as she's bringing this to his attention, she is making a request of him, do something about this. This is going to embarrass all these people. I know that you can take care of this. Can you take care of this situation? It's funny because in Jesus' response, while he is disassociating himself from his mother, and this is kind of...
which is such a classic mother-son relationship. Mother's trying to, okay, here's your time to shine. Come on, show everybody what you can do. And the son like, Mom, don't, you're embarrassing me.
Yeah, well, something like that.
Even though he was 33 years old at this time, mothers out there, just know, your little boy is still a little boy at 33. You can still embarrass him in front of his friends.
Yeah, well, they...
Not my mother, of course.
Yeah. No, nor mine. No, she will every once in a while.
Just to be clear.
But I get it's really more, I think, I have always understood this, that essentially what he's saying is, like, you don't get to tell me what to do. I take orders from my father.
I'm over 30 now, Mom.
Yeah.
You can't tell me what to do.
You don't get to tell me what to do anymore. But it's the thing is, as he says that he does nothing apart from the will of his father. He doesn't do anything apart from the will of the one who sent him. So This is what's really interesting about it, is that we know where the story goes. He's going to end up going on and doing it anyway, right? So Mary says, they need more wine. And Jesus says, mind your own business, basically. woman, which we didn't really talk about that, but it's not a term of some of you in your Bibles. If you look at it, you'll actually have a little footnote there. And it'll say, this is not a term of disrespect.
Not a mean way to say it, right?
It's not a mean way to address it. It's the way, but it's more akin to the way that you would address like a stranger politely, like miss, something like that. Like, excuse me, miss. It's not rude,
Interesting.
but it's also not the way that you would talk to your mother.
Right.
So that again is demonstrating this. He's kind of moving out of this relationship, this maternal sort of relationship with Mary at this point, and he's establishing himself as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, as the ruler of all the earth. He's coming into kind of his own authority in this moment. Is kind of what's all being wrapped up in this, one little expression that he says back to her. However, the thing that is interesting is he ends up going on to do it, and he does nothing apart from the will of the Father, but it seems that it is the Father's will for him to provide here. So then it also seems that perhaps in some sense Mary's heart and her mind may have been aligned with the Father's, which shouldn't be a surprise to us at all, because after all, God the Father did look down and pick Mary, of all of the women on the earth and all of the history of the earth, to be the one who would carry, his son and birth himself, into the world. So may very well be that
she was pretty tuned in then.
Yeah.
It's okay to assume.
Yeah, and that kind of goes, I think, even back to, again, the thing that you had asked before about what Mary's intent was. Mary may have, known. She may have had some kind of, whatever, divine sort of premonition about this is the will of the Father. It is the will of the Father that these people should be, should have this thing. But however she asked it, whatever it was that she said, Jesus was trying to make it very clear to her, I'm not doing this because you've asked me to do this. I'm doing this because it is the will of the Father. So he says it to her, woman, why do you involve me? As it says in the NIV, he says, my hour's not yet come. Presumably giving some kind of indication about the difficulty with my hour's not yet come is, okay, if your hour is not yet come, he's going to go on and perform the miracle anyway. So what is the hour that he's talking about? The hour can't possibly be the hour where he's going to kind of make a public, demonstration of his power. And even though this one isn't really public, because as we're going to go through the story, nobody even realizes that Jesus did this except for the disciples, are the only ones who really, nobody else even noticed there was a problem except for Mary and then the disciples and the people he had, filling the water jars here. So it's not really, it's done in public, but it's not like a public declaration, whereas everybody's going to see it. So people are kind of up in the air about what it means, my hour has not yet come, but it also seems that it might be an allusion to his death, burial, and resurrection. And we may be seeing something of that. We have the third day, and then we're going to have the wine representative of his blood, and all of those things that are transpiring in this story, where the hour he's talking about might be the hour of his glorification, basically, through his resurrection. So it probably has to do with whatever was on Mary's mind specifically, other than the fact that they ran out of wine, and we can't really say that for sure. However, this is his response to her, but then her response after that in verse 5, his mother said to the servants, do whatever he tells you. So while Jesus looks at his mom and says, leave me out of this, it's not our concern. He could have been saying that too. That is one of the things. One of the translations that would have worked, this is none of our business, and included her with him, or it's none of my business, or leave me out of this, or any one of the ways it gets translated. Whatever he said, she knows somehow that he's still going to do something, because then she looks to the servants and she says, do whatever he tells you. So in verse 6, nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding about 20 to 30 gallons. So, something very interesting going on here. There's some kind of significance to biblical numerology for sure, but people will have different...
Well, insofar as much as numerology was important to the Israelites, I mean, the Hebrew language is all wrapped up in numbers and each letter and word having a numerical equivalent, things like that. Am I wrong, or is this sort of some sort of
it's
apocrypha I've picked up?
No, I mean, it's you have to be careful with how far you take it, for certain. But numbers have significance. This is why you see, 7s and 12s and 3s.
That's why the Bible code is such a big deal.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. I don't know how, Bible code. Bible code's really tricky because in order for it to work, you would have to have, there's so many different variants of manuscripts and things like that. And I'm not sure how they claim to have the right manuscripts.
I'm not
right
a big
letters.
Bible code guy, by the way. I'm just putting that out there, but that is sort of part of the whole basis of the idea, at least.
Yeah, I certainly don't put it past the Lord he's infinitely, wise and can do anything, and he certainly could encrypt a code throughout the text of Scripture, but there's just so many different problems with how that might actually work that it's just kind of like, there's probably, I don't know that there's much to it. Of course, he could also write a Bible code that would turn up in all of the different constructions from all the different manuscripts that we would have too, which is possible, but it's just not really a thing that I concern myself with. However, as far as numerology goes, just with the simple numbers, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, in all of those different things, they have significance. And a lot of people have understood the significance of the number 6 to be, it has to do with man, for one. We know that from the mark of the beast that comes up in Revelation. His number is 666. It's the number of a man. And that is the day on the 6th day. It is the day that mankind was created. It also, in the sequence of numbers, you have 1, which generally, has to do with unity, which makes sense because it's 1. You have 2, which sometimes is said to have to do with division. You have 3, which is said often to, be symbolic of perfection. And this is why you see things repeated in triplicate. There's some kind of emphasis or some kind of perfection that's trying to be established there. This is why the angels say holy, holy, holy. They say it 3 times, essentially saying that God is perfectly holy, that sort of thing. With the 666, 6 being the number of a man, but it also being 1 shy of 7, which 7 is completeness. So if 7 is complete, like the earth was completed, right, in 7 days, that sort of thing, you see 7 having to do with its fullness, something that's whole, something that's complete, 7. If that's what it is, then something that is incomplete would be 6. 6 would be incomplete. You're just shy of being complete and whole. There's something lacking in you. Then you have 666, just like holy, holy, holy. We have, you are, incomplete, incomplete, incomplete. You are perfectly incomplete. You fall short of completeness perfectly. And it is this
brutal.
Yeah, it's this emphasis on being perfectly incomplete. Well, in this story, and again, maybe like the 3rd day, but probably not. The significance of it, whether it's there or not, or people are reading this into it, you have there are 6 of these stone jars there that are used for ceremonial cleansing. And this is something that we see all throughout the Gospels, this kind of Pharisaical sort of requirement of man that was put on people. In Mark chapter 7, it says, the Pharisees and some of the teachers of the law who had come from Jerusalem gathered around Jesus and saw some of his disciples eating food with hands that were defiled, that is, unwashed. Yes. Oh, no. The Pharisees and all the Jews did not eat unless they give their hands a ceremonial washing, holding to the tradition of the elders. When they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash, and they observe many other traditions, such as the washing of cups and pitchers and kettles. And this was a requirement that was put on the people from the Pharisees. So you had to be ceremonially clean, and they stored this water in stone containers instead of clay, because stone represents purity. A stone is pure. It is one thing. It is a stone made from God. It consists of only one thing, and that is what they would store the water in, so that the water wouldn't become unclean, as opposed to clay or something like that, which is a mixture of all kinds of mud, and dirt and little rocks and things that might be in that. They used stone because it was pure and it was clean. But you have 6 of these things. So you have 6 representing incompleteness. So you have this human system, essentially, for people making themselves ceremonially clean, and it is represented as being incomplete in this number 6, and that's where this water is being stored. So this is the water that Jesus is going to use to transform this water into wine. It's very interesting that he does it here in these stone jars instead of just refilling whatever containers of wine that they had already. He didn't refill the wine containers, that the master of the ceremony brought with him. He uses these 6 stone containers, so he's trying to make some kind of point. And it seems that the point that he's making, as he is going to put wine into these stone jars that were used to make people ceremonially clean, which is going to obviously be indicative of his blood, which is the thing that will make all of us truly and spiritually clean. He uses that to demonstrate that this old system, this old order of things, this way that you guys think you're keeping yourselves clean is insufficient, and it doesn't do anything, and it is being replaced because I'm here, I'm on the scene now, my ministry is starting, and this is a foreshadowing of the purification that is going to come through the blood of Jesus, that is going to supersede and kind of outdo man's ceremonial cleansing.
Wow, that is certainly much more in-depth than I have ever heard before.
Yeah, I like it. It's really cool. It's a really cool picture. I mean, this is not something that there's too many things that are going on with this for it to just be like, so there were these things over there, and he decided to use them instead. Like, why would he not just refill the wine containers that they had already? He's he's clearly trying to make a point here. And it's a ton. I'm trying to look. It's about it. It said that there's each one of them held about 20 to 30 gallons. So you're talking about on the low end. And it says that. So if we just keep on reading, Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. And then he said, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." So if they filled these things to the brim, and as John said, they held about 20 to 30 gallons. You're talking about 120 to 180 gallons of wine. This is a lot of wine. Cana, it's not a very large city. It's not, there's likely not a ton of people there. It's a lot of people. I mean, probably everybody in the community is invited, but it's not a whole lot of people. But there's more wine now at this party than they could possibly ever need. It's 180 gallons. That's going to go a really long way. I don't think anybody you could probably all try to get together and say, we're going to take down all of this wine, and you would all probably pass out, I think, before you drank it all. But this is kind of the point of the miracle, that when Jesus shows up and when Jesus supplies, he supplies more than enough. He gives you more than what you need. As David says, in the Psalms, that his cup runs over. It's like you have given me too much here. You have more than met my need. You have given me everything that I need. And this is kind of, as Jesus is inaugurating his ministry, this is what I'm saying. There's an abundance of what is coming. There's going to be more than you could ever need, than you could ever imagine. So your big problem that seemed like a big problem, Mary's thinking, this is a big problem, but she's also probably thinking, but I know you can take care of it. All of a sudden now, very small problem, very insignificant. So they draw it out, they take it to the master of the banquet, and then you have this interaction with, the master of the banquet. So in verse 9, so they take it over, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine, and he did not realize where it had come from. though the servant who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside, right? So the guy who's in charge, right? The bridegroom. And he said, Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best until now. So again, we have another kind of indication here that this wine, contains alcohol. There are lots of people who like to make the argument that wine back in those days, it was just grape juice, or it was very, very diluted and really didn't contain.
I've heard that, and it's usually the people who think all alcohol is bad that come up with that explanation.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
It seems like it would be more powerful.
How?
Just from what I know about, ancient fermenting practices.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't really do a whole lot in, I don't know, they didn't hold back a whole lot.
Yeah, well, there's just no reason whatsoever in the text of Scripture anywhere that anybody should ever read about the wine that they're talking about and think that it was something akin to Welsches grape juice. It's right. There's nothing there. And, one of the chief examples of this is when Jesus says you don't put new wine into old wineskins. And then he says, because it'll explode. And the reason that it will explode is because it's fermenting inside of the wineskin, right? The alcohol is expanding. So you're putting it in there and it's expanding. And then he says it's going to blow up and it's going to, run out and ruin the wine. So yeah, there is absolutely no reason to believe that. And yes, it is the people who just make it up. I don't think I have read a couple different things on it because I've heard it before. And I think the last one I read, somebody said there's zero evidence anywhere that it would have, not contained any alcohol. It may have been, diluted in some instances for sure, and maybe to make it last longer or whatever.
Yeah, because the alcohol would, kill the microbes in drinking water, so they would put more water into it if they wanted to cleanse it.
The same reason that Paul tells Timothy to take a little wine for your stomach, every now and then. Stop suffering with your stomach ailments. Drink a little bit of wine. It'll help you.
Right.
That same sort of thing. So yeah. And then as the master of the wedding here says, that's most people understand this as you serve the good stuff first. And then after the people have drank and they're starting to become a little bit tipsy and they can't really tell the difference anymore, that's when you bring out the cheap wine, right? you let them get a little bit tipsy, and then you bring out the cheap wine, and then they think the party still is great. You start off on a great note, and then they can't really tell the difference anymore, and you bring out the cheaper stuff. But something crazy and out of the ordinary has happened here, that this guy, the bridegroom, at least as far as the master of the party knows here, has saved the good stuff until the end. So the point,
he has a redemption of his reputation.
Yeah.
He was about to be old no wine Joaz, and now he's old good wine. He's classy Joaz. He saves the good stuff for last.
Yes, and that is the whole point, I think, of this miracle. Is that every time I kind of teach or talk through this, the point that I make at the end is that I think what Jesus is demonstrating in this is that when Jesus is on the scene, when Jesus shows up, the best is yet to come. You haven't seen the best yet. You haven't tasted the best yet. The party hasn't reached its culmination yet. The best is still yet to come. We talked about this a little bit, I think, in the Christmas episode when we were talking about the Jewish conception of moving from darkness into light, that there's this idea that things are going to continually get better, this optimism that things will always be moving from a state of lesser to a state of greater. And that is the way that it is with God. And the crazy thing to think is that in eternity, this is the same sort of idea. And it really helps me to kind of, when I'm wrestling with eternity and you start to think like eternity is a long time. Won't I ever get bored eventually? Won't I ever get tired of singing these songs or doing these things or whatever? And the fact of the matter is that God has the potential to make every moment better than the last for forever. And this is the demonstration, essentially, that is going on here, where when you think you have already seen the best, and when you think like the party's about to be over, the party's never over. The celebration is never over so long as Jesus is on the scene. And it's going to be actually even better than it was before, and better than you could possibly imagine the further on you go into it. Now, that's a demonstration of eternity. Obviously, in this life, this wedding came to an end at some point. These people aren't still out partying and drinking, but the point stands that when Jesus is around, the best is yet to come.
Love it. I love it. So does that mean, I mean, going back to the alcohol conversation, the first thing that somebody brings up when are Christians allowed to drink alcohol conversation, the number one volley in that exchange is Jesus turned water into wine. Does this clarify any? Look, I know we're talking about, the proclamation of the divine mission of the Christ child coming down, starting his salvifical mission to save all human beings from some sort of abysmal eternity, and reuniting with the oneness of the Father of the universe. But can we drink alcohol though, Chris? What is? I know people are you thought people might have forgotten, but I know there's a lot of people out there still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're asking,
just put a little bit of water in it. Apparently,
yeah, put a little water in it, and then
just dilute it. That's a great way. Yes, as far as like church politics goes, you're going out to a church dinner, nobody's ordering wine, you drink wine, and if somebody starts, looking at you funny, put a couple ice cubes in there. Be like, oh, I'm diluting it, like the Hebrews used to do.
The Hebrews did. Yeah, well, it's funny because wine it's something that God gave to mankind, and he's not shy about it. In the Bible, it has all kinds of symbolic implications, which may be attached, even to this story and God's provision here, but it can represent joy. In Psalm 104:15, it says that he's given wine to gladden the hearts of man. It shows an abundance. In Isaiah 25:6, it says God provides a rich feast of well-aged wine. If it's well-aged, it's not grape juice, because that doesn't age well. It goes bad. Only stuff with alcohol in it ages well. So,
Yeah, when Welsches grape juice ages, it turns into wine, folks. So...
there's
I don't know where to go with this argument.
Provision. It says in Jeremiah 31:12, he gives grain and oil and wine to his people. And then it actually is associated with the appearance of Messiah in Joel chapter 3, verse 18. It says, when he appears, the mountains will drip with wine. So God has not been shy about, how he feels about wine, and that he gives it for mankind to enjoy. He also has not been shy about how we should enjoy it. Again, I'm not condoning in any way, shape, or form any kind of drunkenness, and the Bible is pretty clear that we should, remain sober-minded, but there's all kinds of things, that kind of cloud or kind of distort or change, the ways that we think and act, that we, use all the time. Any different types of medication. I can tell you right now, with the sickness I've been having, been taking a couple different medications, and they have different strange effects on my body and on my mind, but they help me at the same time. So don't want to overdo it on those, but, caffeine and all kinds of different things that we put into our bodies that have these effects. The fact of the matter is, and Paul, kind of what he says kind of really applies here when he says, I won't let anything master me. I'm not going to let anything be a master over me, and I'm not going to give myself over to something in such a way that I become its slave. So if you can, if you can consume, alcohol and it doesn't become your master, and you don't let yourself get to the point where you're, making poor decisions and saying things that you would regret, and, becoming whatever, incapable of driving or whatever, any of the other things, making poor decisions, then...
Mastership coming in all different forms, dependence being one of them, alcoholism, of course. But, I mean, one could say that if you're schmodally shrapnelled, as they say back in my hometown, that at that moment, you are not your own master. The drink has taken control.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say so, and that is definitely something that you need to watch out for. So, and this is one of the reasons that people will say, it's a slippery slope, so you're best to just stay away from it. And I think it's just kind of ridiculous. I think that we need to train believers, or whatever, in whatever regard that is, our students, our congregation, our children, our families. People need to be trained to know what the Bible really says about stuff, to be responsible with all of the things that we have in our life, all of the different resources and all of the things that we have, and how to handle these things, in such a way that is not, rather than, completely removing something all the way away because, there's the potential. I mean, you could turn on your TV and spend too many hours a day watching TV or watch terrible things, and nobody's saying like no Christian should ever have TV because of, somebody's saying it somewhere, I'm sure. But like,
yeah, well, if that's what they're into, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. This, believe it or not, Chris, you have given me some clarity during this episode. And, I think it's relevant on this day, January 1st, the first day of the brand new little baby new year, 2022. While we are all hesitantly looking forward to a better future. I'm sure there's more than one listener who, has had, of course, some watered down wine last night and perhaps woke up wondering this morning if they had disobeyed the Lord. And hopefully that this brings a little bit of clarity to you as well. And again, in the tradition of the thinking of the ancient Hebrews, remember, it's a new year. We are moving from darkness into light, folks. So keep that in mind as we begin this new year, and you perhaps are nursing a little bit of a headache. Jesus still loves you, and things are going to get better.
Yes, the best is yet to come. And while, it's hard, I think, a lot of times for us to see that in this life, and I know that a lot of people going through a lot of different seasons, and sometimes it seems like your best days are behind you, and there's not much to look forward to ultimately in eternity. And that wedding, the great wedding day that we're all looking forward to, the marriage supper of the Lamb, when we are all joined together with Jesus, while we have that to look forward to, I think that even in this life, no matter what circumstances are being thrown your way, that there is still fellowship with God to be had in the midst of that. There's greater revelation of who he is to be had in that. And I say, with great certainty that no matter your circumstances, no matter what you're going through right now in your life, the best is still yet to come for you. I believe that for myself, and I believe it for everybody else for this year. So world's a crazy place, man, but God is a good God, and in the midst of it all, he never lets you down. And when you think the party's over, he shows up and tells you to have another drink.
Amen. And we pray the same for us as we continue with the podcast and the show. We've got some fun ideas for this year, so we're going to continue moving forward. Thank you, everybody who has left all the wonderful reviews at the end of the year there, especially after the Christmas episode. That really helps us out, helps us, climb the charts and have new people find the podcast, and it just makes us feel all warm and fuzzy. And if you leave a good one, a nice one, or even a mean one on whatever, we will love reading those on the air and interacting with you guys. Chris, is there anything else you want to leave the nice people with out there?
Happy New Year and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to Ravel. To learn more about who we are, what we believe, or how to support this ministry, visit our website at ravelpodcast.com. If you have a question you would like answered on the show, or to let us know how we're doing, email us at contact@ravelpodcast.com. This project is made possible by the prayers and generosity of listeners just like you.
Okay, let's give it a try again here.
Oh, yeah, you brought that home there at the end very nicely.